If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. Today is the question and answer podcast for March. As a reminder, these question and answer sessions are not to be taken as medical advice and should never replace the services from trained health professionals. I'm here to support you and to give you some useful information and insights that you can use to end the binge eating habit, but it's always up to you to seek medical monitoring or nutritional advice or mental health care when it's necessary. In these Q&A episodes, I want to share what I've learned in my own recovery and also through the experiences of others who have read my books or gone through my course. These episodes will feel more conversational. I just want to talk to you in a way that I would do if you were on a group support call with me and you had a question about something that was coming up in your own recovery. The last thing I want to say before getting to the question is that if you're new to the show today, I want to welcome you, and I also want to mention that if you're listening to these Q&A sessions, and if something I say sounds confusing or maybe different from what you're used to hearing about binge eating, I recommend going back to the beginning of this podcast and listening to those early episodes where I explain the basics of the Brain Over Binge approach, and I think that will just give you some context as you're listening to the Q&A episodes. So now I'm going to move on to today's question from someone I'll call A. She says, I have had an incredible shift in mindset, and although I have binged a few times since reading your books, I am hopeful and I am starting to see some changes. A very brief background about me, I developed anorexia following a very strict diet to lose weight about 10 years ago, which then turned into binge eating, with dietary restriction and overexercise to compensate. I feel that I sometimes use binging as a form of self-punishment when I'm ashamed, mad at myself, etc. And I know it will make me feel terrible and goes against all of my goals. I'm trying to be my own best friend, but I'm not having much success. It feels as though the feelings inside me are too strong and that I do not deserve to be happy. Do you have any advice about this? So the first thing I'd recommend you do is that you go back and listen to episode 15. This one was called Readiness for Recovery. And it talks about when you feel like you have some issue like an emotional problem or a situation in your life, or in your case, it's this desire for self-punishment. If you feel like a problem like that is getting in the way of you dismissing the urges and eating adequately. That episode just kind of talks about that whole issue when you feel like something is holding you back from dismissing the urges. And the reason that this desire for self-punishment might get in the way of you dismissing urges has to do with your desire for recovery. Because to dismiss the urges, you have to fundamentally want to dismiss them. I mean, not in every moment, because in the moments of the urge, it's going to feel like you want to binge, and that's the moment you have to get through. But overall, you have to have this desire for recovery. So I think episode 15 will help you just take a look at that, because if you truly feel like this desire for self-punishment is getting in the way of dismissing urges, then it might be something that you need to address. And anytime that self-punishment is brought up, like I said in the beginning of the show, this is not taking the place of mental health advice. It's not taking the place of medical advice. So if you're having that desire often, it's definitely something to seek help for. But I do want to give you some advice or just some thoughts that I hope will kind of help you through this. My guess is that you do have that overall desire for recovery because you're trying to get better. You're submitting a question to the podcast, and anyone who's doing that does want to get better. I don't think you need to overthink it. Like, you do want to get better. So I think what's happening is just in the moments of the urge, your brain is kind of using what has worked in the past to get you to binge. And maybe what has worked in the past has been, you don't deserve to be happy. You need to do something that goes against your goals. It's like somewhere along the way in your past, these thoughts have led you to binge, so now they keep coming up. Now, whether or not they had any truth in the past, I think that right now they're probably automatic. They probably just keep coming up because they've come up in the past and they've gotten you to binge. So now your lower brain just keeps producing them. So, having a thought that you should binge because you need to punish yourself doesn't have to be your truth. I think that you're probably discovering what your truth is, and your truth is that you want to be binge free. You don't want this in your life. So the goal in the brain over binge approach is to dismiss all the thoughts that encourage a binge. And that includes thoughts of whatever you think the reason for your binge is, like all the logical reasons that your lower brain brings up, or that kind of these automatic thoughts that have been conditioned from the past. I just think it's not all that helpful in the moments of the urge to try to analyze these things and try to figure out why you want to self-punish, or why you think the binge is going to kind of fulfill some need or help you cope with something. I think that once you decide you want to quit, then any thought that rationalizes a binge needs to be dismissed. So just kind of keep in mind that it's a possibility that you can experience this thought and then still not binge. And when you don't, you're going to build confidence, you're going to feel better in your life, and that desire to self-punish, I think, will gradually go away, because it could just be this automatic pattern that you're having. And you hear a thought saying you don't deserve to be happy, so you binge, and that's just your pattern right now. But somewhere inside you, I think that you do know that you deserve to be happy, and you deserve to live a binge-free life. Another thing, while I'm talking about happiness, is I think it's important to realize that recovery doesn't necessarily equal happiness. I think that when I was binging and I thought of recovery, I thought of it as this wonderful state where I was just meeting all my goals and I was happy all the time. And, maybe not all the time, but I really thought recovery equaled happiness, at least mostly. So when I had days that I was binge free and I still wasn't happy, or I still was really stressed out, or I didn't seem like I could ever meet my goals, it was kind of like, what's the point? I'm never going to be happy anyway, so I might as well binge. And I think that what was ultimately really important for me was to realize that recovery didn't mean happiness or not. It just meant I wouldn't binge. And that, of course, took away a big source of pain and shame from my life and gave me the opportunity to be happy. But not binging does not equal happiness. Not binging equals not binging. It was really important for me in my own recovery, and it may be important for you too, to realize that in recovery, you're free to be happy, you're free to be unhappy, and if you're unhappy, you still don't have to binge. You can dislike yourself, you can be not your own best friend in certain moments and still not binge. You don't have to binge when you don't feel like your own best friend. You don't have to binge when you don't feel happy. And I hope that that helps you in some way. Just maybe think about trying to break that connection of thinking that recovery equals happiness, because I think that leaves a lot of people at risk for binging when things are not going well in their life. If you realize that, then when you hear that thought of you don't deserve to be happy, so you should binge, you can more easily recognize it as neurological junk. You won't attach to that thought as much or believe it as readily, because you know that not binge eating is not a ticket to happiness. Maybe that sounds a little uninspiring, but I think that having that realistic outlook can help you defend yourself against many of the lower brain's reasons and excuses for binging. Because if you don't have that realistic outlook, then it can be easy to fall for these type of thoughts that say, because life is so hard and because you don't feel happy, then you should do something to make things worse, which binge eating does. But there is something inspiring in all of this, I think, and the inspiring thing is that when you do stop binging, it does make your life better. It does make your self-image better. It makes your self-confidence improve because you're not constantly feeling out of control. So your life will get better and you'll develop more of a desire to take care of yourself. Now, whether or not you become happier overall is a different story than recovery. But speaking from personal experience, I can tell you that no matter what happens in your life, you will never regret stopping the binge eating habit, and therefore taking away this huge roadblock that prevents you from living your life in whatever way that you want to live it. That's all for today's question. So thank you for joining me today. I want to remind everyone that there is a link in the show notes to get my free ebook, The Brain Over Binge Basics. And in that ebook, you work on the 5 components of dismissing urges to binge. And I talk some about dismissing urges today. So if that concept is kind of new to you, I recommend getting that free ebook so you can get started learning to experience your urges in a new way. I really appreciate you being here today and staying committed to living free of binge eating. I always want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.